pays to cover up the other deficits in the bill.
Okay. So increased tax, okay, got it. So what's the largest cost in this bill? The majority of money spent in this bill is for tax cuts for corporations, right?
As we understand it, yes.
So you got to figure that some of that $338 billion is going to go to more tax cuts for corporations. It would stand to reason that the $300 billion that's being taken away from American families to help them pay for health insurance is being used to pay for tax cuts to big companies. As we learned yesterday, these are some of the very same multinational corporations that are rewarded in this bill, in this tax bill. They get tax breaks to shut down production in Mansfield, Ohio, and Lima, Ohio, and Cincinnati, Ohio, to move overseas, set up production there, sell back in the United States. So the beneficiaries of this provision on the $338 billion are again going to be the same corporations that are being rewarded for sending American jobs overseas. Now, we know that according to CBO, this bill, again, because of the provisions, Senator Wyden's spoken so well about the provisions that were slipped in last night to unravel the Affordable Care Act. A bunch of us with taxpayer insurance willing to take insurance away from up to 13 million Americans, having nothing to do with tax reform. We now know this bill will cause, according to CBO, will cause health insurance premiums to go up 10%. 10%. For many families, that's a lot of money. So my next question is based, Mr. Crosso, on the best analysis available. What's the average tax cut for a tax filer earning between $40,000 and $60,000 a year?
Well, it's about $630 according to numbers from the Institute for Taxation and Economic
And that's
Policy.
all tax filers, correct?
It's all tax filers, and I should say that's a net figure that also includes those households that see tax increases.
So that means the average tax cut for a family of four in Akron, Ohio, or Youngstown, Ohio, or Gallipolis, Ohio, earning $60,000 a year, the average tax cut would be $630, correct?
Yes.
And for a tax filer's earning a little bit less, 24 to $40,000, what is their expected tax cut under this bill?
About $340. Again, this is from the ITEP analysis.
So that would mean, that would include an individual in Ohio filing alone, earning $25,000 a year, they would get about $340.
Correct.
So here's the problem. According to the Joint Economic Committee, a 27-year-old in Ohio earning about $25,000 a year would see their health insurance premiums increase by $395 a year. They get $340 in tax cuts. So, but paying $395 more for health insurance, they're $55 in the hole. So what they did last night by inserting this health care repeal, not only are they costing 13 million Americans their health insurance, those that keep insurance are seeing their costs totally wipe away their generally not very generous compared to what corporations are getting, tax break that they get. So, and you said a family of four earning $60,000 a year could expect a tax cut of $630. The Joint Economic Committee says that same family is going to pay $1,431 a year in health insurance premiums under this bill. So they're $800 in the hole. So if you want to cut taxes for the middle class, Mr. Chairman, why don't you cut taxes for the middle class? And one more point I want to make. A group of us were invited to meet with the president, we're invited to meet with Gary Cohn, the chief economist or the chief economic advisor for the president, about a week ago, and the president from 7,000 miles away in Asia called in the middle of this meeting. And one of the things the president said after complimenting himself on a fine trip, how highly rated his trip was and what a good job he was doing, and we all nodded. Then the president said, you know, my economist, and this was a question for Mr. Cross, so my accountants told me that, and Senator Bennett was at this meeting, my accountant told me that there's not anything in this bill, this would be bad for my personal situation, and there's just not anything in this bill for rich guys like me. And then the president said, that's why we put the estate tax repeal in this bill, because there's nothing else in this bill for rich guys like me. Is that true?
Your time has expired.
Okay, I just want a question, Mr. I know you don't like that question, Mr. Chairman, but Mr. Crosso?
Wind up.
Was that true that there's nothing in the bill for rich guys except for the estate tax repeal?
It's our understanding, and this is also based on JCT tables that assign the aggregate values of this tax cut by income class, that the majority of the money spent is on those above 200,000.
And the president's probably in that category. Just, I mean, we don't know because we've never seen his tax
Mr.
returns.
Berthold.
We do know what he's making right now.
All right, Senator, your time has expired. I'm going to have to be pretty tough on the expiration of time because I want both sides to have a full right to question. But Mr. Berthold, I have a question I think has to be asked at this point. Do you agree with the statistics just identified in tax reductions for various income classes?
Mr. Chairman, we prepared the distribution analysis that you've seen, and there was supplemental information that a number of the members talked about yesterday in terms of number of taxpayers that have increases or decreases in tax of $100 to $500, greater than $500. I can't verify any of the calculations done by an outside organization without knowing more facts about the example that they create.
Thank you. Senator Isaacson.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask unanimous consent that I be able to let Senator Scott replace me in the order, and that I'll replace him later on.
Okay.
Senator Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Acuna, I'll have a question for you. I'm happy that we're having a conversation about what the definition of a tax cut is for the middle class. From my perspective, the importance of this question cannot be overemphasized because everyone that I talk to in South Carolina they're not concerned about someone else's taxes. They want to know how this tax reform conversation impacts them where they live. We can make jokes about other people's taxes and get a lot of press over that, but for the hardworking families in South Carolina, one of the important questions we should answer is, why do we want to continue an individual mandate that is a tax and using that tax to punish hard-working folks who live paycheck to paycheck? I don't have an answer. The question I have is, what does it mean to deliver real tax cuts to real people in real places where they live? Well, if you are living in a single-parent household with an average income, according to tax returns, between $36,000 and $40,000, our tax bill delivers about a 55% cut in taxes. That translated for those of us who live on the wrong side of the Potomac is a real tax cut. What does it mean for the typical American family who makes around $73,000? Well, a tax cut means 40% of what you used to pay, you can now use to buy school supplies, to have a dinner out, or to simply help you meet your ends. Because the challenge in today's real world are real folks strapped without a pay increase in a decade, looking at Washington and wondering, where are they in this conversation? Why do we spend so much time demonizing one side or the other when in fact no one cares which side you're on? What they really care about is how can they take care of their families. That's our objective here. And we are doing the good work of the people. Let me ask my question. I'm getting ready to ask a question, Mr. Chairman. I've got 2 minutes left, sir.
It's his turn to ask questions either, so that's...
Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate what you're trying to do.
Let me finish my comments, I've heard a lot from you so far today.
I want you to be able to ask your questions.
Thank you so much, sir. I'll do that right now.
The appropriate order is my colleagues.
Okay, let's have...
The reality of it was you had an opportunity to say you didn't want me to speak, but you allowed me to speak, so I'm going to finish. Thank you very much. Ms. Acuna.
And I want to get back to the order of the speaker.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your unanimous consent allowing me to speak earlier. I'll finish. Thank you. Ms. Cunha, as we look at the impact on those hardworking families that I just described in great detail for the express purpose of us not having a demonization of either side, Democrats have a passion for people, Republicans have a passion for people. Our tax reform actually delivers, as I spoke specifically about classes of folks in our society who benefit from tax reform. By increasing the standard deduction, do we not help simplify a taxpayer's ability to no longer have to worry about itemization, but to be able to do their taxes simpler by using the increased standard deduction?
Yes, we do. It's significant simplification.
So 9 out of 10 households, as opposed to spending the aggregate 6 billion hours doing taxes, for the hardworking Americans who have so little time, so little margin in their schedules, they will be able to spend more time with their families because we've simplified a complex, complicated tax code. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Senator. I didn't realize that Senator Isaacson had yielded to you his time, so I apologize for interrupting you at all.
Oh, no problem, Mr. Chairman. I'll take another 45 seconds if you don't mind.
Go ahead. Your questions were very, very appropriate, I thought.
Thank you, sir.
All right, let's turn to Senator Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for holding this markup, which is, I think, another mindless exercise by the United States Senate perpetrated on the American people. While we sit here today, the Chinese are building infrastructure all over their country. They're building infrastructure all over their region, stitching together a global economic powerhouse with which our children are going to have to compete in the 21st century. Since 1980, we have cut our spending on domestic discretionary spending, which includes our roads and bridges, by 35% as a percentage of our gross domestic product. We have cut military spending over the same period of time by 35% as a consequence of our gross domestic product. We are today, as we sit here, collecting 18% of our gross domestic product in revenue, and we are spending 21%. How irresponsible. And for my colleague yesterday to assert that I wasn't saying the same thing when President Obama was president was untrue. I was. When Bill Clinton left the presidency, he left behind a $5 trillion projected surplus. This committee cut taxes again. And then we fought 2 wars that we didn't pay for. So we may have a passion, as Senator Scott said, for families in this country, but we don't seem to demonstrate one for the next generation of Americans. And we're not doing it with this bill, which will not allow us to make those investments in infrastructure, which our country needs us to do to compete and to lift middle-class wages again in the United States of America. This bill gives up on our country. And we should be doing this in a bipartisan way so that we can make Medicare sustainable, so that we've got the revenue that we need to perform functions of our government, so that it's a balanced plan that makes sense. And this is an unbalanced plan which is senseless. We are giving our children the short end of the stick in 2 very profound ways. One is we're saying to them, you know what? We're not going to make the expenditures on you that our parents and grandparents made on us. We don't think you're worth what our parents and grandparents thought we were worth. And we're not going to charge ourselves the same thing that our parents and grandparents were willing to pay to give you that benefit. And just to make it even more profoundly unfair than that, we're going to say, we're not going to pay those bills. We're not going to pay that debt. You have to pay that debt. We're going to live in the house, but you have to pay the mortgage. That's what we're telling the next generation of Americans. And we're saying nothing nothing in this bill to the 22% of American children in the 21st century who are living in poverty in the United States. We are silent about that. And the bill has actually gotten worse if you look at what they've done to the child tax credit. The complete lack of refundability that says to poor children in America, you're invisible to us, in a way that the children of members of the United States Senate are not invisible to us. So with my remaining minute, Ms. Acuna, I'd like to ask you about the Congressional Budget Office letter yesterday that said that this deficit-busting tax bill that's been offered would require statutory pay-go to go into effect, triggering automatic cuts totaling $136 billion this year. That includes an automatic cut to Medicare of about $25 billion. So, Ms. Acuna, will the revised mark undo the automatic Medicare cuts, yes or no?
Senator Bennett, I'm happy to respond to tax policy questions with respect to the chairman's modified mark. Tax policy questions.
So is there anybody who is going to tell the American people whether they're going to face a $25 billion cut in Medicare between now and the time we cast a vote today on this committee?
Senator, there won't be any Medicare if we keep spending like you guys want to do. So let's get down to talking about the particular.
That's completely
we're talking about.
That's completely incorrect, Mr. Chairman.
No, it isn't incorrect. I've sat here for 40 years, and I've watched my Democratic colleagues spend and spend and spend and spend without asking where's the money going to.
Let me say again, Mr. Chairman.
Well, don't give me that.
Mr. Chairman.
I've had enough of that for last me the rest of my life.
Mr. Chairman, when President
Then they blame us.
When President Clinton left the White House, there was a $5 trillion projected surplus.
Yeah, because it was the first Republican Congress in over 40 years.
Well, there was good bipartisan work done there.
Yeah, because
when
it was
President
the first
Obama,
Republican Congress in 40 years.
When President Obama arrived, he inherited a $1.5 trillion deficit. When he left, that was $585 trillion.
Yeah, guess who caused the spending?
And now it is $666 billion. And we're about to blow a huge hole in it. And it's not Michael Bennett, the Democrat, saying that. It's the CBO that's saying that. It's all the independent analysis that's saying that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Senator, I understand your position.
And I appreciate your position.
Senator Casey is next.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I want to start with Mr. Barthold on a question that I think a lot of us are wondering about today. I'm holding the modified mark here, page 10, at the top where it begins the section on repealing the individual mandate. Here's my question. Have you had the opportunity to analyze this section of the chairman's modified mark?
Senator Casey, yes, I mean, it's included in our revenue analysis in JCX 57.
Okay. And how long will it take you to conduct a full analysis of the provision and its impact on health insurance coverage and premiums?
Some of that analysis has already been provided based on joint work with the Congressional Budget Office that was commented on earlier today, and in some of the questions reported that the Congressional Budget Office projects that on average, because of adverse selection, premiums will increase by 10% above what they would be under baseline projections, that by the year 2020, there would be approximately 13 million households, or individuals rather, uninsured compared to baseline projections. And in the first couple of years, that would be more like 4 million uninsured compared to baseline projections. And so that analysis has been done.
Josh. But you have not.
The revenue analysis has been done, and as I reported earlier, my colleagues are working on updating the distributional analysis that we routinely provide for the entire mark as
I
modified.
want to make it clear, though, the distribution analysis would be part of the process that would yield a full analysis. Is that correct?
And we provide that information at the request of members to help them, analyze the policy proposals, and we're at work on that, sir.
Okay, I note that for the record that the full analysis is not done yet. Late yesterday, after we had a limited debate here about this new provision on the individual mandate, I described what is happening here in total in terms of the bill, what this bill means to real people, as a thief in the night. And why do I say that? Here's why I say it. We have had an experiment the entire year about 2 ways, and only 2, to debate and make progress on fixing our healthcare system. This is what's happened this year. We started the year and spent months, well into the summer and even beyond the summer, having a fight about repeal of the Affordable Care Act. One side wanted to decimate Medicaid, in my judgment, and we fought like hell against that. It ended up being that there was a stalemate. That was one way to do it, to have a big fight about the ACA, and that fight continues. The second way to do it is to do it in a bipartisan way, the way that we did it in the Help Committee, when Lamar Alexander and Patty Murray led an effort to attempt to pass a bipartisan bill that would stabilize the individual market, which is where most of the problems are, and to do it in a way that's bipartisan. That is still before the Senate. So there's only 2 ways to do this. The way one side tried to do it in a repeal, and the way we decided to do it together in a bipartisan fashion. I think we should focus on bipartisan solutions for health care. Then comes the CBO, saying, as you just noted, Mr. Barthold, repealing the individual mandate would result in 13 million people losing coverage. Senator McConnell, the majority leader, said yesterday this would create, quote, the opportunity to make permanent the corporate tax rate cut. And then, of course, CBO also tells us premiums go up by 10% per year in the next 10 years. Then we hear from Joint Committee on Taxation that says that, quote, millions of low-income and middle-income people face a tax increase. So we have to ask,
this doesn't devolve into a shouting.
What will happen in the context of both tax increases and coverage loss? Whether or not, when Joint Committee on Taxation tells us 13.8 million people will see a tax increase as a result of the bill in 2019. So we have to ask the question, how many will lose coverage and have their taxes increased as a result of this bill? That should be a question we're asking. How many will get the double hit of a tax increase and coverage loss? That's one question we should be asking. We should also be asking, what is the impact of this bill on children? What happens to children? Either children who might lose coverage, but let's say they don't lose coverage. Let's say their parents lose coverage because of the repeal of the individual mandate. What the hell happens to a child in that instance? And when no one is asking that question, no one's asking the question, why the rush? Why does this have to be a drive-by in the middle of the night, rushing through a repeal of this individual mandate, which is so critical to diversifying the risk pool? Why would we rush a tax reform bill through this process? So when I say this bill is a thief in the night, I mean it. That's exactly what it is. Ripping health care from people. At the same time, you're jacking up their taxes.
Senator, your time is up.
Gladly yield.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, our next person is, I think Clara's next, Senator McCaskill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say to my colleagues, if you've got Bob Casey that fired up, that ought to tell you something about the path we're going down. Mr. Chairman, before my time starts, could I have a parliamentary inquiry about the changes that you made at 10:30 last night?
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I wasn't.
Could I make a parliamentary inquiry before my time begins about the changes that were made at 10:30 last night? Is there a summary anywhere? I mean, we got a 100-page document in a table, but surely somebody on the majority side has a list an abbreviated list of every change that you made at 10:30 last night? Because I know there's changes to pass through. I know there's changes to child tax credit. I know there are changes to the bracket. I don't know what other changes. I mean, asking us to read a 100-page document between 10:30 last night and 10 o'clock this morning, in addition to trying to ferret out the differences between what we've gotten and what we're talking about today. It is a challenge, Mr. Chairman. I'm not trying to whine. I don't think that my request is that unreasonable. Do you?
It's the way we work around here. No,
Mr. Chairman, that's not the way we work around here. That's not true. I know the history of this committee. This is not the way this committee works. And you're going to try to ram a vote in the next 24 hours.
I'm talking about the Senate as a whole.
Yeah, but not this committee, Mr. Chairman. Not the way you have run this committee. And I don't understand what pressures you guys are under. Yeah. What is making you do this to us? I don't get it. My questions.
The ranking member.
Mr. Chairman, again, this doesn't come off Senator McCaskill's time. I think that she's boiled this process down to a fundamental question about what this committee is all about. She is asking for a summary, a document that explains the changes that were made very late last night. And we're going to continue with our questions. But I want to work with you because we have got to have this. This is fundamental to the kind of fairness that this storied committee has been all about. So,
okay, Senator McCaskill, the time is yours.
So if this were eliminating a tax, I'm assuming that there would be a negative impact on revenue to the government, correct?
We're referring to the mandate, the mandate, Senator.
Right.
There's multiple components to the analysis. Eliminating mandate in itself would mean there would not be penalties paid in that are currently paid in. So that would be a negative component.
So all this talk about eliminating this tax, let's boil down what this tax represents. This tax represents $43 billion. And I'd get into more details if the CBO were here. But basically, we're talking about $43 billion in taxes or penalties for people who don't buy insurance. And then there's $44 billion because we're going to have to spend more money on dish payments to hospitals. So that's the negative that eliminating the mandate requires. So how come you got $318 billion to spend out of this?
Senator,
if you're getting rid of a tax, how does miraculously $320 billion show up for you to spend on corporations? I'll tell you why. Because you're eliminating $185 billion in payments of subsidies to people who are getting insurance. And by the way, I believe if CBO were here, and I'm sure you would probably agree, the JCT would agree, that no individual is entitled to an ACA subsidy that makes more than $50,000 a year. So let me see if I get this straight. You're taking $43 billion and you're saving people, ostensibly, your argument is, making less than $50,000 a year. You're saving them $43 billion. And then you're turning around with the other hand and you're cutting $185 billion from those same people. Wait, I'm not done. Then you're cutting, I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, $179 billion from Medicaid. Now, I'm pretty sure those people don't make $50,000 a year. So in order to save these poor people $43 billion, you're cutting $364 billion from the same people.
If you would just yield for a second, there are no cuts to Medicaid in this bill.
I beg your pardon. This is the CBO score, Mr. Chairman. I'm reading right off the CBO score. $179 billion in reduced Medicaid subsidies.
Well, there are no cuts.
Beg your pardon. That's where the money's coming from. Where do you think the $300 billion is coming from? Is there a ferry that's dropping it on the Senate? What? The money you're spending is coming out of Medicaid and subsidies to people who make less than $50,000. So you're trying to shop this baby like you're giving a $43 billion saving to people who make $50,000 a year?
Just so you know, CBO said that that's the people who are leaving Medicaid.
Mr. Chairman,
and that's what they estimate is going to happen. So there's nobody cutting Medicaid.
You are spending $318 billion to make tax cuts for corporations permanent. That money is coming from the very people you say you're saving by eliminating $43 billion in tax penalties. Now, I'm from Missouri, and I'm just telling you, I was not a great student in math. But I will tell you, this is not a good deal for people who make less than $50,000 a year. And on top of that, all the middle-class people that are actually taking personal responsibility and buying health insurance, because here's the thing. All these people that lose, that aren't going to go get their insurance now, you know what's going to happen? They're going to get sick. They're going to get a cancer diagnosis. And who, in fact, is going to pay that bill? When they don't have insurance anymore, who's going to pay the bill? I'll tell you who's going to pay the bill. The poor people, the middle-class families are going to pay the bill with a higher insurance premium because the hospitals can't absorb all this uninsured care. We're not going to turn people away from the hospital when they show up with a cancer diagnosis and no insurance. So it's not like these people aren't going to get sick anymore. This is such a scam. So don't trot out here righteous indignation that you're helping the poor people with doing away with this tax penalty. Because you're giving them a little bit of benefit over here, but they're not going to have health insurance, and the people who have it are going to pay more, and you're taking money out of the Medicaid program and the subsidy program.
Senator, your time is up.
I got a lot more questions about the
Senator Nelson is next.
Hope
Okay,
we get another round. I've got pass-through questions.
Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, was that applause for me?
I don't think so.
Well, let me just say that, you know, I'm kind of surprised that we're going through this drill again. If I remember correctly, I think it was 1:30 in the morning in a completely hushed Senate chamber back in early August or late July that John McCain strode into the Senate chamber and walked up to the reading clerk and said no. And as a result, the repeal and replace of the Affordable Care Act was over. I thought it was done. And we had saved health care for over 30 million people. But lo and behold, it came up again in September. Again, an attempt to repeal and replace a different version. And finally, instead of 3 Republican senators voting no, they found that it was going to be more like 10 Republican senators that wouldn't vote for the package of a repeal and replace, and therefore they didn't even bring up the bill for a vote. And here we are again. And it's the same thing. We're going to take the economic underpinning out of it that's going to cause 13 million people, as stated by the authorities, 13 million people are going to lose their coverage, and premiums are going to go up. What did we hear? What did CBO say? 10% a year. So let's see. Now, the first year premiums go up 10% according to the base. Now it comes around to the next year. Premiums go up another 10%. I'm just a country boy, but I understand that if you add that up over 10 years, it's something in addition to 10% all the way up to 100%, that premiums are going to go up depending on the base.
Take these away.
And we want to go through this drill again on what has been stated over and over, that the American people want to have health care for those people that in the past have not been able to purchase health care or to have health care provided. And this is going to take place when everybody on this committee, in fact, wants to reform the tax code, and yet this is the avenue to get additional revenue in order to cut out the Affordable Care Act. I'm really surprised. So instead of working in a bipartisan fashion, which this committee used to be, we're taking more of the same old, same old. I thought that once the Affordable Care Act was saved in early August, I thought we were going to see the sprouting of blossoms of bipartisanship, and indeed, indeed we have. We saw those early efforts with Lamar Alexander and Patty Murray, and then they were squelched in September, and lo and behold, Lamar and Patty are meeting as we speak with about 20 bipartisan senators sponsoring the stabilizing of the current law, the Affordable Care Act, 20, sponsoring that legislation. And here we go again. Under the guise of tax reform, I thought that that issue was behind us, and yet here we have it coming back. And so in my remaining 17 seconds, Mr. Chairman, I think that your provision to generate $338 billion to help pay for corporate tax cuts, when the light of day is shined on this and people recognize what's happening, they're not going to like it one bit.
Well, thank you. Senator Toomey, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm going to get back to this issue, and let's get some clarification, because we've heard quite some extraordinary comments from the other side. Mr. Berthold, could you tell me where in the bill is the text that disqualifies people from Medicaid?
The chairman's mark had no provision related to Medicaid. It was really just tax provisions, sir.
There is no provision that disqualifies people from Medicaid?
Not in the mark as modified.
Doesn't disqualify anybody from Medicaid? How about Medicare?
No changes in terms of Medicare.
Nobody's disqualified from Medicare whatsoever?
That's correct.
Okay. How about the text in the bill that denies people protection for pre-existing condition? Where is that text?
The chairman's mark is a tax mark. It doesn't change requirements on the insurance industry.
Doesn't change
providers.
that one bit, does it? Completely silent on that. How about how much does the bill text specify that reimbursements to health care providers have to go down? Where is that text?
Again, it's the chairman's marks about the Internal Revenue Code. There's nothing related to providers. The
point that I'm obviously trying to make here is that there are no cuts to Medicaid. There are no cuts to Medicare. Nobody is disqualified from insurance. So what does happen? Well, we have a mandate where some of our friends thought it was a good idea that the government should be able to force people to buy a product whether they want it or not, which strikes me as an outrageous and unconstitutional infringement on personal freedom. But nevertheless, that's the law. People are forced to buy a product whether they want it or not. And then, by the way, the government gets to dictate the terms of that product, irrespective of whether people think that it's a good idea. And then there's a category of people, many, who can't afford that product because this market is so badly designed. And then what we do is we say, if you're in that category of people who can't afford this product that doesn't suit your family well, then we're going to punish you with this tax. What we do in this bill, and this is all we do in this bill, is we zero out the punishment that we currently, under current law, we inflict on people who decide they can't afford to comply with this mandate. That's what we do. That's it. And it turns out that in Pennsylvania,
Senator Bennett misstated a fact.
83% of the people who are currently absorbing this punishment, forced to pay this tax, their family income is less than $50,000. You want to talk about a middle-class tax cut? It's the people who can't afford these unaffordable plans who will no longer be punished with this tax. That's all we do. There are no cuts to Medicaid. There's no changes to the program. There's no reimbursement differences. There's no disqualifications for people to participate. None of that. We're simply saying if you can't afford these ill-designed plans, with respect to your family anyway, you're not going to have to pay this penalty. Let me move on to the issue broadly of middle-class tax relief. Mr. Barthold, my understanding is we don't yet have the new distribution tables, but we have distribution tables from the previous iteration, correct?
That's correct, sir.
So when I look at the previous iteration, I see a reduction in federal taxes paid in every single income cohort.
On average, that's correct, sir.
In total, that's correct also, right?
That's correct, sir.
And I also see that in every single income cohort, the average tax rate goes down. Is that correct?
That's correct also, sir.
Now, there have been some changes. Is it your impression that the result of those changes will be to further reduce some of the average tax rates and to further reduce some of the tax obligations for low and middle income cohorts?
In years before the sunset, sir, because remember,
Correct.
the sunset
Correct.
turns off, so you'd return basically to present law in the very last year. But as noted when Senator Thune asked earlier, the expansion of the child tax credit increased the value, and also actually made a further modification that no taxpayer with a taxable income in excess of $500,000 could claim child tax credit. So that means all that increase in value accrues to taxpayers with dependent children,
right,
less than $500,000, and the tax rate bracket effects have effect for everyone in the new 22% bracket and above.
Right. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm running out of time. I would just observe this product lowers taxes on the overwhelming vast majority of middle income and working class families and individuals. The earlier iteration did, and the final iteration does so even more. And I think that should be clearly stated for the record.
I'm glad you pointed that out. Now, let me just say that Mr. Berthold and Ms. Acuna earlier, let me just say there was a question about the refundability of the child tax credit. Now, it is my belief that we index the refundable
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. Your underlying mark provided indexing of the $1,000 refundable portion of the child tax credit, and so that throughout the budget period, that indexing would apply.
Well, we did.
Up through the sunset.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed out that we indexed the refundable part of the child tax credit, which will actually increase it.
That's correct. Actually, our estimate is that the refundable portion would increase from $1,000 to $1,100 in the first year.
That's right. It's a claim that the mark has no refundability on the child tax credit. Is there any accuracy to that at all?
No, as you just pointed out, Mr. Chairman, it increases the amount of the refundable tax credit through time.
So basically, the prior claim that we did not improve the refundable part of the credit is untrue.
That's correct, sir.
Okay, while my Democrat friends may not support tax relief for the middle class, let's not misstate the facts.
Mr. Chairman.
If we can be a little more careful about it.
Mr. Chairman, just yield for a moment.
Ranking member, I'll yield to you.
Mr. Chairman, that's just not factually accurate that we don't support tax relief for the middle class. We do. What we object to is what is on offer now, which is permanent relief for the multinational corporations and temporary relief for the middle class. That's a double standard that favors the powerful against families.
Would the gentleman yield?
I had the time from the chairman.
I'll yield for you.
I was simply going to observe, Mr. Chairman, would it be in order for the ranking member to offer an amendment to make the tax reductions for individuals permanent?
Second.
if you wish to do so.
Mr. Chairman, I intend to offer exactly that. I want it understood if I could respond to my
well,
colleague.
let me just answer that, because we're not going to do that in the committee. But if we do it, we'll do it on the floor, okay?
I intend to offer it, Mr. Chairman.
All right, we understand that. Okay, Senator Portman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We were just talking about the changes that were made in the draft, and one change is to enhance the child tax credit. And it was stated earlier by one of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle that there is a reduction in the refundability, maybe even no refundability in the child tax credit. That's just not true. In fact, the child tax credit is expanded, as Mr. Bartol has just said. It's an expansion from current law. So not only is the tax credit richer than it was before, it's a doubling of the child tax credit. It also is available to more families, and also the refundability of it is expanded. And I just think, again, if we can stick to the facts, for those who are watching, you might want to go on jct.gov, because that is the nonpartisan group that has analyzed this tax reform proposal. It was just said earlier, every income category gets a tax cut in the aggregate, and therefore, in the middle class, there are real tax cuts. In Ohio, the number that we've gotten is $2,375 per family per year. It will now be greater than that based on the changes that were made last night, because the individual mandate funds are going into more middle-class tax cuts. So I would just encourage people to look at the Joint Committee numbers, which are the official numbers, and see the fact that despite what was said earlier today, if you want to tax middle class more, then you should vote no on this bill. If you want to give the middle class a tax cut, you should vote yes on this bill. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the other revisions you made in the modified mark. I think they make the bill better, including a bunch of bipartisan ideas that we already had in there, including middle class tax cut, including a territorial system at a 20% rate, which has been something that's been bipartisan in the past at least. A system that enables us to bring trillions of dollars from overseas back to this country for more investment, more jobs, and higher wages. That's already in the bill. But then you added some other bipartisan revisions that I think can be put in three categories. One, that promote more economic growth. Two, that promote the ability to save for retirement and promote employee ownership, which is a good thing in my view. And then finally, one that's just common sense. For economic growth, I want to thank the chairman for including a provision that a lot of us have worked on for a long time, the Craft Beverage Modernization and Tax Reform Act. Senator Wyden has been a champion of this approach, and the growing craft beverage industry. This bill now gives these smaller companies much-needed excise tax relief that will allow these entrepreneurs to reinvest even more in their businesses and into our communities. Ohio's number 4 in the country now in craft beer production. We like that. The industry now supports about 15,000 jobs. 61 new breweries have opened just last year alone in Ohio. And this legislation is only going to promote the expansion and the jobs that come with these entrepreneurial small businesses. In the savings space, I'd like to thank the chairman for accepting the amendment to the original chairman's mark that protects the non-qualified deferred compensation and also the 401k catch-up contributions. What are these? The amendment protects in the non-qualified space the broad-based stock option plans, which are actually growing in this country. And I think that's a good thing. Among small startup businesses, they're really important. And this gives all employees a better stake in their company and the future of that company. We protect these stock option holders from income tax that would have been on phantom income they may never have received, which I believe would have been unfair. These types of savings vehicles, by the way, are critical to helping small employers attract new talent and for giving employees an ownership stake in the company they work for every day. The amendment also restores the ability for those over 50 years old to use the catch-up contribution in your 401k. This is something that Senator Ben Cardin, again, bipartisan idea, and I fought for. We got into the law several years ago. We want to make sure it stays in the law because we want to encourage people to save more for their retirement. So I think these are important changes. I appreciate you, Mr. Chairman, doing them. Finally, common sense. Senator Coons, another Democratic colleague of mine, and I have a bill called Stop Taxing Death and Disability Act. That's a pretty good title. What it says is that if someone has a child who develops a permanent disability, or if that child were to die tragically, then their student loans ought to be forgiven. And I think this is an improvement over current law as well. Maybe Mr. Bartol, if you're willing, you could walk us through how that works, what happens under present law when a child dies or develops a permanent disability and their student loans are forgiven, and what would happen under this legislation. We've had some tragic circumstances in my state of Ohio. One was the Carducci family in Steubenville, Ohio. Tragically, they had a child who developed a permanent disability, and yet they had a big student loan debt to pay, and this legislation would help them. If you would, Mr. Bartol, just speak briefly on this new legislation that's in the chairman's mark today.
Certainly, Senator Portman. Under general tax principles and a feature of the Internal Revenue Code is forgiveness of any debt is considered an increase in income. And what your legislation would do would be in the situation where more generally where a student had a student loan, often they are co-signed by a parent or a guardian, and they die by having co-signed or guaranteed the debt. That would become, if the loan is forgiven, as is often done on the death of the student, that becomes forgiveness of indebtedness to the guarantor, so to the parent, and they would otherwise have taxable income. And your legislation would make an exception from the general rule in that situation.
Well, again, I think this is just common sense, and it's, again, an example of some of the changes in the chairman's mark last night that are bipartisan, that are broadly supported in this committee, and that will improve the legislation. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Our next person will be Senator Warner.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to try to maybe get as excited as some of my colleagues, but I'm so personally offended by this whole process and disappointed. My good friend, Senator Portman, just listed some of the changes that were made. Some of them might have been good changes, but if you want to know how the worst of sausage making is, he just enumerated a whole series of items, some which may be pretty good. They got secretly crammed in late last night with no input from any of us. Why do people think this is a swamp? Well, that was Swamp 101. My other colleague, Senator Bennett, raised, and no one was willing to answer this, but I got the CBO letter right here. Violates statutory pay-go, $25 billion cut next year to Medicare. Anyone who denies that, I'd ask them to refer them to this document. A friend, the senator from Pennsylvania, went through the point. There's no cuts to Medicaid, no cuts here or there. Well, technically there is not. But, as Senator McCaskill's already pointed out, and what is so absurd about what you've proposed is to save $43 billion in a so-called tax cut. It's going to actually cost the government $44 billion because more people who are going to be uninsured are then going to go to the hospital without any coverage, and that means we're going to have to pay $44 billion more on Medicare disproportionate share payments. So this is a double net loser. And I strongly find it offensive when somebody says there's no cuts to Medicaids. Where in the heck did you get the $300 billion plus to make some of the corporate tax cuts permanent? The effect of getting rid of the mandate cost 13 million plus Americans their health insurance, and that does have ripple effects. So don't claim you're not cutting Medicaid when you're spending the decrease in Medicaid spending of $179 billion and $185 billion in decreased ACA subsidies. At least don't claim you're not doing this then when you're then spending these dollars. I think there's a lot of comments we've heard from both sides that want us to slow down the movement of American businesses abroad. I'm still trying to work through all the new minimum tax procedures. And I actually do claim to have a little background in math and a little background in tax policy. But I find the complexity of what, and I will grant the majority, maybe they wanted to do the right thing, but I believe what you have created is a perverse incentive to actually send more jobs abroad. Because the ability of a company to make an investment, a capital investment, in a relatively high tax nation like Germany, and still move their intellectual property to a tax haven like Bermuda, and frankly, this bill does nothing to remove any of the biases towards tax havens, My understanding, and Mr. Barthold, you may not be able to, I don't think you've had a chance to work through all this, is that you can take those what's called normal return deduction amounts, and then if they exceed the 12% rate the corporation has, those excess credits can be, in effect, blended and moved over towards the intellectual property tax returns, resulting, particularly if you then have that averaging and it's not taken country by country, and that the interchange between the 10% normal return deduction, the foreign tax credits, the 12% now guilty tax rate, and the ability to average these across a series of countries means that rather than decreasing the incentive, we may have actually increased the incentive for companies to move offshore. I'd particularly add as well, you layer that as well on top with the pass-through efforts, and we may have opened up a bonanza not just to existing multinational companies, but in many ways incented a series of small and medium-sized companies using their lower pass-through rate to actually mimic the behavior of some of the large multinationals.
If I could clarify for you, Senator Warner, on the point about tax credits, normal return, and intangible low-taxed income, taxpayers are supposed to apportion taxes attributable to the low-taxed income. So in sort of simple terms, tax credits attributable to normal returns cannot be used to shelter
But there is the averaging across.
It is done on a global outside the U.S. basis.
So the global outside will mean you can then keep your intellectual property in the tax haven, make your capital investment in a relatively high tax nation like Germany, and blend those two, and the effect being that you'll have American companies paying zero.
Well, it would depend on the specifics, sir, but not completely, I think, as you described it, because again,
one of the reasons why this needs more review and more time.
Well, but I will clarify the one point for you. You have to apportion the tax attributable to the intangible income. So if your example was that most of the intangible income is in your tax haven and there was next to no intangible income in Germany, there wouldn't really be anything to blend.
Is it that one? Cameron?
Yeah.
And welcome here to News Now, taking a live look at Camelback Mountain on this Wednesday, and it's fitting because it's hump day as well, and we're taking a look at the camel's back right there. Hi, everybody. Mike Page here alongside now Nicole Garcia.
Hi, everybody.
And she's here because you're going to be going to court in just a little bit for a little bit more on the Philip Brailsford trial that is continuing. Now, this is the former Mesa cop that's accused of...
second-degree murder.
Yes. Of an unarmed man.
Yes.
Okay.
So, do you want me to go through kind of the backstory?
Yeah, let's give them a little bit of the backstory and see where we're at today then. So,
yeah,
how did this all set up here?
January 2016, a man named Daniel Shaver was here visiting for business, staying at La Quinta Inn in Mesa. He is a pest control, he's a pest control guy, so he actually had a pellet rifle and he uses that to shoot down like bats and pests. Well, he was drunk at the hotel, met a couple people, invited them in for drinks, was showing off his rifle right next to the window. So some people in the jacuzzi saw that and obviously got alarmed.
They got scared.
They think it's a real rifle. This guy is pointing it out the window. So they notify the hotel staff. The hotel calls 911. And so what happens is Mesa police officers, a group of 6, go upstairs and they're trying to get Shaver, who they don't know his name yet, they know nothing about him, but they're trying to get him out of the hotel room. They go up there, they take the elevator up, they're yelling commands through a closed door to come out of the hotel room. An officer eventually calls up to the room and says, hey, this is Mesa police, you need to send the female out first, wait for commands, and then you walk out second. So they don't know what's going on.
Sure,
they don't know anything about this call or anything. So they both actually step out of the hotel room, and you're looking at a body cam video. They both step out of the hotel room, and they're intoxicated. But they lie to the sergeant, who asks them if they'd been drinking. They say no. The sergeant yells out commands, which some people say were a little confusing, especially if you're drunk. He says, get on your knees, put your left leg over your right leg, and put your hands above your head and interlace your fingers, making all these commands. So the woman was able to follow the commands. They arrest her. Then it's time for Daniel Shaver to follow those same commands. And he doesn't do it exactly right. At one point, he puts both of his hands behind his back like he's ready to be arrested. They're screaming, no, keep your hands up. If you do that again, I'm going to shoot you, you know.
Sure.
So the sergeant is saying all this. If you don't comply, I will shoot you. If you don't do this, we will kill you, or whatever. Then body cam video shows Daniel Shaver crying. He's crying. He's like, I'm trying to follow your commands. Please don't shoot me. Please don't shoot me.
And at this time, what was the girl doing at this time? She's already arrested, but is she seeing this as well?
Yes, they just put her at the end of the hallway. That's another thing we found out during the trial. So they cuff her, they put her at the end of the hallway, but nobody's really guarding her. Nobody frisked her. I mean, she could have been armed for, and then she, you know, all 6 of them had their back to the woman. Obviously, she wasn't armed, but so she's watching this whole thing, and she gave her testimony. So Daniel Shaver is instructed to put his hands above his head, or put his hands up, get on his knees, and crawl on his knees, basically, to the officers. And he can't quite do exactly what they're saying. He's crying, please don't shoot me. At one point, his right hand kind of goes toward his waistband, and that's when Officer Brailsford opens fire with his AR-15 and shoots him 5 times and kills him. After the fact, they find out, obviously, he didn't have a gun on him. The other woman, the woman who saw this, was saying, hey, he had these basketball shorts on, and as he's trying to crawl on his knees to the cops, they were coming off. So he reached his hand to try to pull up his basketball shorts, is what she was saying. And so now Philip Brailsford was the only one out of the 6 that opened fire. So he is on trial for second-degree murder in this case. And obviously he's saying he feared for his life. He thought that this man was going to reach for a gun in his waistband, so he did what he thought he had to do and opened fire. So obviously the gist of the trial is this a legitimate police shooting or not, you know?
Yes. And this comes in a day and age now when you feel like police across the country are really at odds with people, and you don't know what's going to happen. They're under attack. So
they're under attack. Everybody's got cell phones and cell phone camera video, and that's why earlier this year, the Phoenix Police Department, I went through some of their de-escalation training. You know, it was interesting. I was talking to some of the guys who've been on the force for 30 years, and they tell me 30 years ago it was like shoot first, ask later. You know, and now it's like whoa, wait a minute, take these 4, 5, 6 steps before you employ your gun. And so I actually sat in on a few minutes of some of that classroom training that all of, at least the Phoenix officers, they all have to take this training. They went through different lawsuits, and that, you know, they're saying, hey, you know, just because you feel like that your life is threatened doesn't won't legally absolve you from opening fire and shooting a suspect. They talked about if the officer escalates the situation, you know, he won't be found not guilty if he goes to trial. And for example, yesterday I covered an officer-involved shooting. That was it was kind of a obvious.
And this one was in Phoenix.
Yes, this one's in Phoenix. They were following a suspect who was driving a car that was reported stolen. This driver had a mask on and gloves on. They try to confront him. He runs from the officers. And then as he's running around the back of the building, he confronts another officer who's uniformed. The officer is yelling commands. Then, according to Phoenix police, the suspect pulls out a gun and points the gun at the officer, and that officer shoots and kills the suspect. And in that case, you know, they did find an armed weapon. He was in a stolen car and he was running. So situations like that, it's a little bit more obvious. But here you have this man who, I mean, he doesn't, you know, appear to have committed any crime so far, you know, other than somebody reporting that he had a rifle.
And did they find a weapon then inside the room then later?
Yeah, they found the pellet gun rifle, which does look like a real rifle, but it's not a real rifle. And he had it, you know, it was for his job, so he had a reason to have that rifle out there.
Now, when you're out in the field, you talk to police, do they feel like at this time in their jobs that they have, like you were talking about the de-escalation things, and they almost have like a checklist that they got to go through before they could maybe pull their firearm, or do they feel like the people that they're coming against, though, these suspects, they don't have to go through a checklist, they could just pull it in? So do you think they, at this point, do they feel like they really can't do their jobs?
No, I mean, I think that's, I think the key is training for different situations. It's you have to take in the totality of the circumstances. So like in this case, you know, you get a call, you go to the scene, and there's nobody's screaming, running for their life.
Yes.
No, there were no shots fired in this case. You go to it's a La Quinta Inn. You know, I mean, there's some neighborhood and motels that are sketchier than others, and this one, you know, is kind of a family-friendly hotel. I mean, you got to take everything into consideration. So yeah, that's what they're getting trained to do. I mean, look at your surroundings first. You know, try to, if you can and have time, you know, you got to talk to the person and find out the situation. If you have time to use less than lethal. But obviously, like yesterday, if a guy's got a gun pointed at you and you see the gun and it's pointed at you, well, then by all means, you know, open fire.
Yes.
So, so yeah, it's a lot of training now, retraining officers to think before they shoot, basically.
Now, what can we expect today for testimony in the trial?
So Sergeant Bill Langley, I think his first name is Bill, but Sergeant Langley, he was the sergeant in charge of the group of 6 people, officers that were involved in this shooting. So he gave the commands. I mean, the decision, the way they approached the situation was all up to the sergeant. So, you know, he's retired. He retired 4 months after the shooting. So, although he didn't pull the trigger, if he had stayed on the force and they did an internal investigation on him, he could have been held at least responsible within the Mesa Police Department, Police Department for his role in the shooting, but he's since retired. So he's on the stand. Of course, he's saying that he supports former Officer Brailsford's actions. He said that that was his job to protect the team. He thought the team was going to be threatened, so he opened fire. So basically, he's Officer Brailsford's biggest ally, biggest witness in this case, and I'm sure the prosecution during cross-examination is going to try to, you know, tear his story apart. And if you have seen that body cam video, I don't know if you've seen it and you heard him and the commands. They are kind of confusing, and he was very threatening. It was very much a comply or you're going to die kind of situation. I didn't think, I'm not a cop, but for me, I didn't see any kind of de-escalation. It was like, do what I tell you to do or I'm going to shoot you, There was no gun pointed at them, and again, there was a homicide detective within the Mesa Police Department investigating the actual shooting. That homicide detective testified that he, after watching the body cam video, didn't see a threat, verbally or physically. So at least that Mesa homicide detective wouldn't have opened fire in that situation. So it's really interesting, the perspectives, and also the fact that this former officer is being held on murder charges,
yes.
which is very, very rare.
And now, given the times with the body cameras, if you think about this, if this was maybe 15, 20 years ago, maybe this wouldn't even seen a case.
Yeah, and that's what some of the officers that I speak with talk about is like, 15, 30 years ago, we didn't have cell phone cameras, body cameras. I mean, excuse me, is basically the officer's word against you or the suspect, and usually, people thought officers were more credible. Now that you have all these devices that capture every movement, it's harder for officers, and there are some bad apples, so it's harder for the bad apples to get away with opening their gun or opening fire without a legitimate reason. So I think nowadays, with so many cameras pointed at you and all the controversy going on, officers really have to think twice and think fast, think twice as fast almost.
Yes, I mean, they have such a difficult job. They really have to juggle that time commitment because it really only takes a split second. It's not like how they portray it in the movie sometimes.
Oh yeah, no.
Where there's a duel and
Yeah, if you watch this whole body cam video, it's like minutes. It only takes minutes. The whole ordeal,
Yeah.
And the 5 shots, I want to say, I mean, you couldn't even tell they were 5 shots because it was like 5 shots within the span of a second. That's how fast these, the shots are. So it is very split second, and it's very scary out there. So
yes. And now, do you think when the defense steps up and they go on for their testimony, do you think they might say something like, well, the officers were coming to a situation where they heard that there was a weapon involved. It wasn't like if it was like let's say a loud party. Do you think that might play a factor into how
yeah, that's been brought up.
Okay.
Because it was a gun call. So obviously, if it's a man with a gun call, you have to take precautions. But again, even in Mesa police training, I mean, you're not trained to automatically shoot just because you think he has a gun or the suspect has a gun. Just because and even just that homicide detective testified, even if you do see a weapon in the suspect's hands, that doesn't give you the right to shoot. I mean, it's what he does with that weapon. It's how he acts, his demeanor. You got to there's so many things you have to take into consideration. So just seeing a weapon or reaching for a weapon really isn't a license to open fire when you're an officer. You have to take the totality of the circumstances into consideration. Was he trying to comply? Like yesterday, the guy was running, he was in a stolen car.
A mask.
Wearing a mask. Obviously, he was up to no good, but, Daniel Shaver was drunk, maybe lied about being drunk, was crying for his life, saying, I'm trying to comply. I mean, you got to use some common sense.
Well, definitely a lot of layers to this case. So you'll be in court to break it all down on 5 and 6 tonight?
Noon, and depending on what the producers want, we have producers.
Yes.
They, I might be in 5:30, 6 o'clock, I don't know, but I'll be in the noon for sure. So.
Okay, so we'll be looking forward to your update to see how everything is progressing. Thanks so much, Nicole, for the update.
Me.
Thank you. All right, taking a live look here at Camelback Mountain. We'll be right back on News Now. And welcome back here to News and Now, taking a live look at the US 60 westbound right at Mill. Hi, everybody. Mike Pace here as we continue on with News and Now, taking live feeds from all across the country. And what we're expecting a little bit later, we're going to see if we could get some video of President Trump heading to Capitol Hill. He's once again trying to really push that GOP tax cut bill proposal. And right now, as you can see here, Senate lawmakers are discussing the bill right here. This is on Capitol Hill. We'll have a little bit more of that coming up in just a little bit. We'll dip into some of that coverage there. But I do want to show you, we talk about the president now back from his Asia trip. And if you've been watching, everywhere the president goes on trips, there is a person that is following him that has the called nuclear football. And what is it? Well, Fox News Digital came up with this great piece to explain just what exactly follows the president on these trips.
A number of members on both sides of the aisle of this on and off the committee have raised questions about the executive's authorities with respect to war making and the use of nuclear weapons, and from a diplomatic perspective, entering into and terminating agreements with other countries. To be clear, I would not support changes that would reduce our deterrence of adversaries or reassurance of our allies. But I would like to explore, as our predecessors in the House did 41 years ago, the realities of this system.
All right there, so some interesting stuff there. We're talking about that nuclear football. If you were ever curious what that was, got some insight exactly of what follows the president. All right, now we're going to go live. This is coming up right in our feeds right now outside of Capitol Hill, where we see Nancy Pelosi, and I see Senator Schumer as well doing a tax rally. This is obviously not for the GOP tax cut bill. Let's listen in.
All right, thank you, Leader Pelosi. Let's hear it again. All right, we're going to keep it moving right along. Next up, we're going to hear from Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro.
All right. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here with all of you today. Thank you. We need your voices loud and clear. You're the wind beneath our wings. Thank you for being here today. Really, let me just focus on two points, if I can, for you. The biggest economic challenge of our time is that so many people who play by the rules are in jobs today that do not pay them enough to live on. Wages have not kept up with rising costs, and we have too many families who are struggling today, every single day, to make ends meet. Meanwhile, big corporations, millionaires, billionaires, they write the rules to make government work for them, and the Republicans are their comrades in arms in rigging the game against the middle class. And we say, yes, kill the bill, enough is enough. Yes, as Democrats, we want to work for an economy that works for all, not just for the very rich and not those who have the most lobbyists. We have to create good-paying jobs, jobs that cannot be outsourced. We can't lower the cost of living for families by cracking down on corporate monopolies. We need to build an economy that makes it possible for more people to reach the middle class. Let me just talk about when jobs are outsourced, my friends, it drives down wages and salaries here. The Republican plan is wrong. It encourages corporate excess at the expense of the middle class, yet it is immoral. It doesn't say anything about our moral responsibility to one another, particularly those people who have worked hard and who have played by the rules all of their lives. Let me mention one other piece to you, because they're going to tell you that this is about the middle class, that we have a child tax credit that is there. Do not be fooled by their proposal for a child tax credit. It shuts out military families, rural families, large families, minimum wage earners, and those who have the youngest children. And I will tell you, they extended the upper limit of the child tax credit, but low-income people can't take advantage of it, but members of Congress can go ahead and get a child tax credit. Boo is right. Listen, all of us here, my colleagues who are here, all of you out there, we know why we came to Washington. We came to Washington to fight for hard-working, middle-class families. Those are the people that we represent here, not those, as I said, with the most lobbyists. I'll just say to you, all of you, you've got some well-meaning people who serve in this body who are making the fight, but it is the external pressure on the institution that makes it move. You are that external pressure. Keep up the noise. Do not take no for an answer. Already you'll say no to them when it comes next November. Thank you.
Kill the bill! Kill the bill! Kill the bill! Let's welcome next to the stage Representative Peter Welch of Vermont. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question for Donald Trump, and I have a question for Paul Ryan. President Trump, I know you like oligarchs. What do you got against students? This bill raises taxes on kids trying to get ahead. If they get tuition assistance from an employer or from their school, that's income they have to pay. If they get a student loan, they can't deduct the interest. And student loans are going to be more expensive because we lose the private activity bond. The cost of education is going up, not down. President Trump, what is your problem with students?
Release your tax returns.
And I have got, release your tax returns, President. The second question is a question for Paul Ryan. What's your problem with democracy? This bill was written in secret. What I just spoke about with students, you could go over into that building and ask 435 members of the House of Representatives whether they want to raise taxes on students. 435 answers would be no. But it's happening. Thank you, Paul Ryan. Why? Because it was written in secret, and it is for the benefit of his and the Republican donor class. Not one penny.
Not one penny. Not one penny. Not one penny. Not one penny. Not one penny. Not one penny.
Not one penny. Not one penny. Not one penny. All right. Next up, I want to welcome to the stage, he's the vice chair of the DNC, Congressman Keith Ellison.
Not one penny! Not one penny. Not one, we can't do one. Nope, not. So look, we have about a 5% unemployment rate right now, maybe a little lower than that. On Wall Street, you look and watch the TV and it says that the stock market is booming. You see that out there on the tube? And then, so right now, major corporations have big time stock market valuation. They have profits, and they have a huge share of the national income that they're accepting. If you put a big tax cut for rich people and multinationals on top of this economy, only a few things can happen. One, they're going to use that extra money to buy political influence right here. They're going to use that extra money to do these independent expenditures on folks like us who oppose them. They're going to give campaign donations to people who chase behind them. They're going to use it to corrupt our politics. The other thing they're going to do is they're going to merge more. We already have highly concentrated markets in every single market. 3 or 4 companies dominating the whole market, whether you're talking about beer or internet service providers or no matter what you're talking about. And they're gonna merge more and more and more with all this money. And then the next thing they're gonna do is give each other, buy back their stock and give each other more dough. The one thing that will not happen is they're not gonna increase your pay. They're not gonna invest in plant and equipment. They're not gonna hire anybody else. They're gonna offshore your job somewhere else. And if you got a dream of opening up your business, you got like, hey, I've always wanted to open up the business. They're not gonna help you do that. If you're an innovator and you coming up with some great new idea, they're gonna maybe buy you out or step on you. They are going to make this economy of ours, they're gonna make our country a worse place to live, folks. Less democratic, less economically prosperous for most people. And we're gonna have a tiny rich elite, and everybody else is gonna be just struggling to survive. And on top of that, they'll try to turn us against each other, one versus another. We won't let it happen. So let me just say this. You guys know the story. You are the activists. You are the fighters. You are the brave. You are the courageous. So get out there and convince all 350 other million Americans that we have got to kill the bill. Kill the bill. Kill the bill. Kill the bill.
Kill the bill. Kill the bill. Kill the bill. I'd like to welcome our next speaker. She represents Illinois' Fighting Ninth. She is Jan Zukowski with a message about what happens when we fight.
Right.
Thank you.
First of all, I want to say thank you to all of you. You are the people that so far have stopped the Republicans from taking away our health care. And now we've got to fight to kill this bill. And they want to stick again in this bill repealing Obamacare. So who wins in the Republican tax scam? Well, you know already. Millionaires, billionaires, the biggest corporations. And who loses? You do. You do, and pretty much everybody else in this country. 36 million middle-class families will actually see a tax hike, while the largest multinational corporations get a $500 billion tax break on offshore profits. Families will lose. They will no longer be able to deduct moving expenses, but corporations, they're going to be able to deduct the cost of moving their companies overseas. Teachers, I was one, won't be able to deduct out-of-pocket costs for their school supplies, but corporations can deduct the costs for their paper and pencil and all of their supplies. Middle-class families won't be able to deduct state and local income taxes from their property or their property taxes, but corporations will be able to do that. And small tax credits for families expire in 5 years, but big tax cuts for corporations are permanent. It's not just unfair, it is a job killer. So it creates permanent tax breaks for outsourcing by taxing offshore profits and foreign investments at nearly a 0% rate. How do Republicans propose paying for the $1.5 trillion in tax cuts for corporations and the super wealthy that aren't paid for so far? They're going to cut Americans' health care. I see here today the littlest lobbyists, and we thank you so much. They were there for us on the health care bill, and they're here for us now because they will no longer be able to deduct medical expenses for their children under this tax bill. Imagine.
All right, more news now will continue next, including we're going to show you a new House bill just being unveiled within the last couple of hours. It's called the Congress Me Too bill, and it's to fight sexual harassment in Congress. And welcome back here to News Now. Taking a look at the 10-day Foxcast. We're expecting 82 degrees today, and then look at Saturday and Sunday. Yep, we'll take it there with a nice 77 degrees on Saturday with sunny skies. That's the day you call up all your friends and family from out of town, and you just let them know casually what the weather is. Hi, everybody. Mike Pace here as we continue on with News Now, taking feeds from really all over the country. And remember, when breaking news does occur, we have you covered right here on News Now. We just don't play a soundbite. Sometimes we'll play that whole press conference, just like the one I'm going to show you coming up right now. This is some lawmakers that just unveiled a new Congress bill to overhaul sexual harassment policies on Capitol Hill. Let's listen to a little bit of that. This is amidst all of the sexual accusations in Hollywood and even for that Senate race, too, in Alabama with Roy Moore. So many accusations going around with this Me Too movement. Let's listen in to some lawmakers as they unveil this bill for the first time.
40 years until last year when we started this discussion after the very brave young woman Emily Doe out in the Stanford University case, and members started coming forward sharing their own stories with each other. And I just want to give a shout out to the Me Too campaign online and just the difference that that has made in the environment. We're seeing extraordinary social change over the last month, and I for one believe that this kind of education and prevention will help us stop sexual violence in the workplace, in the military, on our college campuses, and most importantly for us and for many people working here right here on Capitol Hill. Sadly, sexual violence and harassment are all too common on Capitol Hill, and this violence creates a hostile work environment that inhibits Congress from properly serving the American people. This legislation ensures that everyone working on Capitol Hill, from the new interns, the most junior staffers, to members of Congress ourselves, will receive training and annual harassment training that incorporates the best practices for sexual violence prevention and education. Ignorance will no longer be an excuse for this sort of behavior. As I said to one of my colleagues yesterday, everyone is on notice now. No one has any excuse. This bill reforms the administrative process for investigating and resolving the complaints, and most importantly, it empowers the survivors with the knowledge that their complaint will be administered fairly. And I want to specifically make a note that there is a procedure for anonymous reporting for purposes of accessing counseling for the survivor. I think something that's been lost in this debate over the last 4 decades is that for many people, they may choose not to name the perpetrator, but they may simply need to process and get results and resources for their own recovery. And I think that's important, and we should have a process for that to happen. Over the past few months, hundreds of thousands of Americans have shared their experience with sexual violence and harassment through the Me Too campaign, and our offices are hearing stories every day. Their stories demonstrate what research and the stories of countless women have already shown to be true. Sexual harassment is an epidemic in our country, and unless we take efforts to stop it, it will continue to impact people's lives every single day. Their careers will be thwarted, their lives will be impacted, their personal relationships will be impacted, and the fact is, this is not okay. The bipartisan Me Too Congress Act provides that we take this issue seriously, and it's just the beginning of our work on sexual violence. We do, as Representative Speer mentioned, have a bipartisan task force to end sexual violence, bipartisan co-chairs, and if you'd like further information, be happy to see Will Pisano in the back. Thank you.
And finally, Congressman Bruce Poliquin, who has been an enthusiastic supporter of both the Cease resolution and the Me Too Congress Act.
I want to extend a big congratulations and a thank you to Jackie, for Congresswoman Speer for heading up this effort. This is something that needs to be done. It's very clear, and I'm sure it takes a lot of courage to step up the way Jackie and Annie have both done. So I want to thank them very, very much. And you know, you look at Congress here, you look at the halls of Congress, we're all walking these halls every day, and a lot of these staffers are very young. And Ryan mentioned that, some of the other folks did. And those of us who have been blessed with kids, Jackie and I were just talking before we came on, we have kids about the same age. I'll tell you, we always worry about our kids, always, at all times of their lives, including during the early parts of their career. The last thing that we should have to worry about, frankly, is them being harassed in the workplace. There is absolutely no place for this in America. I don't care if you're in the media. I don't care if you're in the entertainment business. I don't care if you're a professional athlete. I don't care if you're running a company. I don't care if you're a member of Congress. There is zero place for this in our society. So I salute everybody jumping on board for this. And you know, the executive branch already has protocols in place and a way to deal with this issue. It's about time the legislative branch does also. We need to make sure that everybody who comes to work feels safe coming to work, so they can do their job. And in this case, they can serve the American people. And this is a bipartisan effort. We have men here, we have women here, we have Republicans, we have Democrats, we have the Senate, and we have the House. So we've got a lot of work to do, but the first way to stop this, the best way to solve any problem is to first bring awareness to that problem. And that's exactly what we're doing, and I salute Jackie again for doing this great work, and I am thrilled to join her and everybody else to fix this problem. Thank you.
All right, we have a glitch here. Evidently, we cannot have persons outside the building participate in a press conference in this room. We have one more speaker. Her name is Maya Raghu, who's the Director of Workplace Equality at the National Women's Law Center. She's a very important speaker. We will address a few questions here, and then we're going to take this outside so that you can hear from her. Yes.
The $15 million figure, can you help us understand who actually approves those settlements and which members of Congress are actually privy to the information about those settlements? And secondly, on the two members of Congress that you mentioned yesterday at the hearing who you said have been accused of sexual harassment, do you personally know who those members are? And in general, do you think that these members who are being accused of this behavior should be named?
So to answer your first question, the Office of Compliance has provided us with that information about the more than $15 million and the 260 settlements. Those settlements, my understanding is, have to be approved by the House Administration Committee, and the House General Counsel, after representing the harasser, then has to change hats and go before the House Administration Committee and make the case for the settlement. So, in my view, a gross conflict of interest as well. As to the second, we are here to protect victims. That's why we have contemplated this wholesale change and reform of the Office of Compliance, and it's the victims who want to be protected, and we will protect them. Yes. Well, no one should balk at it, because there shouldn't be an office in the Capitol that is engaged in this kind of conduct. And if you are engaged in this kind of conduct, or you are allowing this kind of conduct to go on unabated in your office, then you should be called out.
And I just want to take exception. I don't think anyone will object to that because it impacts all of us. We want to hold up the highest standard for members of Congress and for a workplace that's free from this type of discrimination. And frankly, our constituents expect that of us. So I think we want all members of Congress to comply, just as we do with the mandatory ethics training and other issues that have already, we've had sweeping reform. We want that type of reform here. So I beg to differ with you that people will object to that.
And I would just add,
You know, the other piece of this is, and I say this to folks fairly often, we're employers. We have an obligation through our chief of staff or deputy chief of staff to have an HR department or component to our job. So how we would process that, how we would handle an employee if they were mistreated or they did raise a concern, speaks to the character and integrity of how we operate our offices. So I think I understand the direction or orientation of your question, but I would sort of just shine a light on the aspect of us making sure that we respect our staff enough to make sure that if they do have an issue, that we do confront it and that we have clear standards in place so that it is addressed properly. And I think all of our constituents will want to know that we take that obligation seriously, and through the mandatory training, there is no excuse not to handle these, a complaint if it were to arise, in a professional, responsible manner. And so that would be the other piece I'd like to add to Congresswoman Custer's answer.
All right. Yes, next question.
Yes, hello. Thank you very much, Eric Garcia. Roll call. You mentioned yesterday, obviously, the 15 million figure. Is there any possible way that this month, that the funds from the money could change because of the fact that this does pretty much come from taxpayer dollars? Would that all change under this legislation, or would there be any plans to change that?
Well, under the legislation, it would require that if, in fact, a member is responsible for the settlement, that they would be responsible for repaying the U.S. Treasury for that settlement. Personally, out of their personal funds, yes.
Hi, Marissa Schultz, New York Post. Thank you for doing this press conference. The two members that you mentioned yesterday, one Republican, one Democrat, have you approached them about this, and are you confident that they are not hurting people currently?
I have not approached them.
And
Yes.
why haven't you?
It's not my role to approach them.
And what is the hesitation about naming them if they are known sexual harassers? Are you concerned that they're currently doing the same thing?
I am here to protect the victims. We're all here to protect the victims. And the victims are the ones who do not want this exposed. Yes.
And welcome back here to News Now on this Wednesday. You're taking a look here at the US 60 westbound. Everything is going smooth there right at the mill exit, and that's the way it should be on a Wednesday at this time. We're coming up on the 11 o'clock almost. Hi, everybody. Mike Page. So we continue on with News Now, taking feeds from all over the country. And remember, when breaking news does occur, we do have you covered. Here's what we're looking at right now. The House is still debating, the GOP tax cut bill as well. Right outside of Capitol Bill, there are Democrats that are calling for the bill to be ripped up. They don't even want to see it on the floor. We'll have much more on that in just a little bit, but I want to go to right now. There is a new study out, and it doesn't seem like you have the American dream until you have a bunch of debt associated with that. Why do I say that? Well, because a new study says that America's debt has now hit an all-time high. We're talking everything from mortgages to credit cards to even the car you drive there. It's all bundled up, and it is now at an all-time high. Take a look at this Fox News digital piece. Right there. So as the dream continues to rise, so do those prices, unfortunately, therefore people that are just continuing to get in more and more debt there. We'll continue on here talking about, we all know that our phones can listen to us and track pretty much our every movement. I mean, even when you have it just on the counter, it could hear a conversation, and then 5 minutes later you could have an ad for something that you were talking about your friend with, maybe a new pizza place opening or something like that. It's all being tracked. Now, though, there is a pill that could track if you took your meds. Take a look at this Fox News digital piece.
A Fox 10 News Alert.
All right, now we take you out to St. Louis. You're taking a look here at this massive warehouse fire as crews really trying to knock down this situation, but a massive warehouse fire in St. Louis as Sky Fox aerials are high above, and you take a look, a couple of ladder trucks there, well, 3 ladder trucks that we could see in this shot, and they are really trying to knock down this fire, but obviously this building will be at a total loss. I'll try to get some details for you on just exactly what type of warehouse this is in St. Louis, but you're taking a look here of these live images coming to you right here on News Now. Remember, when breaking news does occur on News Now, we have you covered, taking you out to St. Louis here for this fire. And wow, massive fire. It's a 5-alarm fire at a South St. Louis warehouse. This is all coming from our affiliate there at Fox 2 St. Louis. Crews with the St. Louis Fire Department are battling this 5-alarm warehouse fire. It happened around 10:30 local time at the one-story building located on the 3900 block of Park Avenue. About 12 to 15 people were inside of the building at the time. One worker was taken to the hospital for smoke inhalation. There were initial reports of magnesium in the basement. However, according to the captain, this is not the case, so that's the good news there. The smoke has increased and tells us that the fire will continue to get bigger if they don't try to knock this down immediately right now. The fire is not going outside of this business, fire captain said. The building is, as we're taking a look here, fully engulfed at this time. Still a very fluid situation, obviously, here. Massive warehouse fire in South St. Louis. This is a 5-alarm fire, and our thoughts are with the first responders there as well as the firefighters, as they are really going to be busy all afternoon facing this warehouse fire, 5-alarm fire. We saw the 3 ladder trucks there. Take a look at that shot there as that smoke just pours right into the ladder little cherry picker right there, is where the firefighter really trying their hardest to beat down on these flames here. But right now they have no control whatsoever, so they're hoping in the next 15 or 20 minutes that they could get some sort of control on this fire. But wow, massive fire there, and we are learning that about 12 to 15 people were inside the building at the time. Just one worker was taken to the hospital for smoke inhalation. At this moment, it seems like that could be maybe the only injury. We're hoping that that is the case there, but I'll continue to look here for more updates regarding the story as I'm just looking on different sites here in St. Louis. St. Louis Fire Department is also tweeting this out as well, using precautions for people in the area of South St. Louis. You can see these different ladder trucks there trying to get some hold of this fire, but right now it is just burning out of control here. And we are learning that about 80 firefighters are working this fire right now. This is a one-story warehouse. This is 1 block by half block, with the fire being reported in the basement here. So one person being treated for smoke inhalation who was inside this building. Other than that, no other injuries at this time associated with it. We're hoping that the firefighters remain safe too, as they have a busy afternoon and early evening ahead of them. I mean, this is going to be an all-day project, and we're hoping for the very best for those people there. But this is a 5-alarm warehouse fire in South St. Louis, if you're just joining us here on News Now. This is in the Botanical Heights neighborhood, if you're from the area in St. Louis. Happened just around 10:30 there local time, so we'll try to get you guys the very latest throughout News Now. If any new updates pop up, of course, we'll bring that to you. But take a look at these aerials here. Wow. This is a massive fire there in St. Louis, and the crews doing their best to get some kind of control. But look at this. It's just ripping through the roof right now, and this fire started in the basement. There was about 12 to 15 people there inside at the time, and definitely an out-of-control fire at this time. Wishing the very best for those first responders. You're watching News Now. More news and updates coming up next.
is a Fox 10 News Alert.
And welcome here to News Now, taking a live look at aerials in South St. Louis of this massive 5-alarm fire. Up to 80 firefighters are currently working this situation. A massive warehouse fire at this hour there in St. Louis. This happening about 10:30 their local time when this fire started. We're learning that it happened inside the basement and then just totally took control of this warehouse. Not sure just how this fire sparked yet, but 80 firefighters going to be here all afternoon and into the early evening hours there in St. Louis as they continue to try to get some kind of control of this fire at this time. But yeah, take a look at the ladder trucks there as well, and you're seeing how close firefighters had to get, and you're seeing all the debris there on the ground from this fire as well. A very difficult task for firefighters as they are continuing to try to get control of this this fire. A hazmat team was called in the area because many thought that this could be a magnesium lit fire, but it was believed that the fire not reached those pallets, so could have been much worse. This is a very industrial area in South St. Louis, and so right now they're trying to contain this fire so it doesn't maybe jump to other areas in this industrial park. This is in the Botanical Heights neighborhood if you're from the area in St. Louis. So you're taking a look here at this fire truck, and look at the damage that the truck received here. It looks like the debris just fell right on top of that truck and really caved in part of that fire truck. So this is what fire crews are having to deal with. Very scary stuff there. Only learning of one injury at this time, and that was a person that was inside of this warehouse at the time. There was anywhere from about 12 to 15 people inside this warehouse when this fire broke out. But you're taking a look here, the roof is about to go as well here as this fire continues to rip through this warehouse. Let's see if they could go back to that shot of the fire truck, though. That just showed you just the amount of debris that came from this building onto the fire truck as well. Caved part of that truck in. That looks like the truck's going to be a loss as well. But when you look at these flames just ripping up still, and really cause of concern for these firefighters that really can't get the good approach to the fire yet. You see them right on the corners here, but they can't even knock it down from the area that we're seeing it from because of this massive combustion that is happening here inside the warehouse. This is happening, if you're from that area, the 3900 block of Park Avenue, happening right now. So we'll continue to monitor that situation for you right here on News Now.
This is a Fox 10 News Alert.
Well, we do want to take you now to a press conference that is happening right now. This is happening in California, of the Red Bluff shooting that killed more than 5 people in that senseless shooting in California. Let's listen in.
Assistant Sheriff Phil.
Morning, everybody. Let me start off by saying that late last night, at the last briefing, there was some confusion about how many actual people were killed in this incident. Let me now say that we have a total of 6, including the gunman. A little confusion last night. We had 2 scenes on Bobcat with a total of 3 victims. We had a scene at the corner of Stagecoach and Oak Park where we had a deceased female along the roadway. We also had some So just to let you know, so those are all adult victims. We have no deceased children, none. We do have information of a child that was shot at the school that is currently in critical condition at UC Davis, and I think everybody knows that already. The numbers are this. We have a total of 14 victims, including 7 children, 4 of which were injured at the school, injuries ranging from very minor to, like I said, life-threatening injuries. We have a 2-year-old that was injured in a car. We are told that his injuries were not life-threatening. So late last night, detectives and investigators served a search warrant at a home on Bobcat. The search warrant was served to the residence of Kevin Jansen Neal. We have positively identified him as the shooter. This is his last booking photograph. We have had history with him. He was currently out on bail for an assault with a deadly weapon that occurred in January. We had other contacts with him. He was not law enforcement friendly. Upon serving the search warrant at his residence, we anticipated part of the investigation. We were looking for his wife. We couldn't find her yesterday. We located her dead body concealed under the floor of the residence last night. She was an obvious victim of several gunshot wounds. We believe that's probably what started this whole event. So I wanted to say we had teams from the FBI. We have investigative teams from the Department of Justice. All crime scenes have been cleared and secure and have been processed. I'm going to let Special Agent in Charge, Sacramento FBI, Sean Reagan, speak to you a little bit about that. Right now, we are doing follow-up investigations, contacting victims for statements. We will be pursuing that diligently in the next few days. But as far as the scenes out here, we are done processing the immediate scenes. I do need to say that the citizens of Rancho Tehama, they need to check on each other. They need to check on their neighbors, because this individual was literally going up and down the road and shooting at random structures. So it is possible that you may have a neighbor or somebody that could be injured or hurt that we are not aware of. So if, be diligent of your surroundings. If you see something out of the ordinary, please call our office and let us know. We'll follow up on those leads if we get those. So right now I'd like to introduce Sean Reagan, Special Agent in Charge of the the Sacramento Field Office of the FBI. Sean?
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thank you to the Sheriff's Department and all our partner agencies. Let me just start out by expressing our deepest sympathies to the victims, the witnesses, their families. This was a tragic event and a truly heinous crime, and so our heartfelt sympathies and condolences go out to all. So we are here as the FBI in a supporting role. We're here to help with the investigation, support the Sheriff's Office, support our partner agencies with this very critical investigation. Our primary focus at the Sheriff's Office request was to bring evidence response teams, our FBI evidence response teams from our Sacramento office as well as our San Francisco office. We brought them up here yesterday, and we were detailed to process the crime scene at the school, so the shooting scene at the school. So we had approximately 30 of our specialized folks up here processing that scene. They finished early this morning, late last night. And we will process that evidence, analyze it, put together reports, and we will then turn that over to the Sheriff's Office for their investigation. We obviously remain up here, and we will stand by to assist in any way we can, in any way we're asked to. Let me just say that great partnership up here in terms of law enforcement and the community, in terms of coming together to help victims, help the community, and to investigate this truly senseless crime, senseless event. So that's it for me, and I'll turn it back over to you, Assistant Sheriff.
So right now I'm going to introduce District Attorney Greg Cohen. He can provide you with a little information about what his unit has done and what he knows about the shooter in this incident. Greg?
Thank you, Assistant Sheriff Bill. Appreciate it. Goes without saying, heartfelt condolences for my community out here. Sheriff Henkrat said it best. He said it early. There's been a mass murder in Tehama County, and I hope the citizens, not only of Tehama County, but elsewhere who have expressed their heartfelt condolences, can heal from this. Just wanted to say a couple things. As the district attorney, I have three kind of pieces of involvement. One is the prosecution side, two is the investigative side, and three is the victim witness side. I want to talk just briefly about the victim witness side. We have a victim witness component of our office that was out here yesterday. We plan to be out here as well Thursday. We're dealing with the Corning School District right now, the elementary school district. In fact, at this moment, they're working together to start the process of providing services to those victims, specifically children, teachers, staff that were affected. The investigative side yesterday was involved with some of the initial concerns regarding the children in the school, and they're still continuing to work on one of the aspects of the case, which was the officer-involved shooting aspect of the case. My desire today is not to answer questions. I'm going to be providing some video at about 2 o'clock coming out of my office, where I hope I'll be able to answer a lot of questions concerning what Neil was being prosecuted for by my office and kind of a little bit more about the facts and circumstance of that case. As Assistant Sheriff Johnson said, Mr. Neil was out on bail on that case. That case stems from January. He bailed immediately from the jail. So he was able to make bail in the amount of $160,000, and he did not have the opportunity to come into court, so we would be in a position to request an increase in bail. So that's his right. Sheriff Johnson and I discussed it this morning. A person's innocent until proven guilty. So even though there might be a rush to justice in this situation, as far as he should have been tried and convicted, that's not how our system works. The system works by being arrested, placed in jail, and then at that point, a person, based on the Constitution, is entitled to bail. And that's what happened in this case. So, thank you. Assistant Sheriff.
So to let you know that this case has progressed quickly, and efficiency was, I mean, it is just remarkable about how these teams came together in our law enforcement community, and we worked together to get this done in a quick, efficient manner. Barring any other remarkable incidents directly involved with this case, this will conclude. This will be the last media briefing, unless we get new information. We are going to take some questions, not a lot, because, like I said, we still have an ongoing investigation. You all know that the shooter was killed by officers. There's an officer-involved shooting protocol that we adhere to, and we don't discuss that typically until that investigation is concluded. So that may head off some questions regarding that. I do want to let you know that, again, there's been no officers physically injured. The officers that were involved in that shooting are at home resting. One of the officers, I think, is elected to continue to come back to work, but that's up to him. So we are going to have a critical incident debrief with the first responders. That'll take place later this week. Mental health officials will be involved in that. We are reaching out to the school to provide them with whatever assistance they need in that respect. We are planning, probably in 2 weeks, a large critical incident debrief involving all responders, including medical, CAL FIRE, all those people that responded, to let you know that there was literally hundreds of responders that responded to this call. We did, I have to say, I have to say thank you to the Red Cross, because you know, you have hundreds of responders, and we can't let them all go. We can't clear them from the scene, and eventually they get hungry. So the Red Cross stepped up, provided meals, and we also had, you know, we have to take care of these people. So I just want to say that this community came together, law enforcement came together. As tragic as it is, like I said before, madman on the loose. So this case is remarkably cleared. We will move forward, and we will start the healing process. Okay? You have one.
What can you tell us about the
Stop. Don't yell out. Do it in an orderly manner. We'll just do. Raise your hand and I'll call upon you. Yes, sir.
What can you tell us about the firearms that he used in this crime? Were they legally obtained by him? And if so, was there any kind of seizure that was supposed to take place in light of the criminal matters that were pending? Okay, here's what I know about the firearms. 2 semi-automatic rifles with multi-round clips were seized, a number of multi-round clips. These firearms are manufactured illegally, we believe, by him at his home. So they were obtained in an illegal manner, not through a legal process. They're not registered. Yes, ma'am.
With respect to the children at the school, did any of the deceased have children at the school, and did the neighbor next door have children at the school?
Sorry, repeat your question.
With respect to the children at the school, did any of the deceased have children at the school? Did the neighbor next door who had the TRL on, did she have children at the school?
Yes. I'm aware of at least one.
It would belong to the deceased or the neighbor?
We have a father of a child deceased that was at the school. He wasn't shot at the school.
That was the neighbor.
At another.
That wasn't his neighbor that he happened to speak with?
No. Julie?
You said that there were other children injured at the school. Were any others shot, or was it?
One child shot at the school.
But the others that were injured, they were not shot?
Yeah, residual, mostly glass, from flying glass, mostly. Flying debris. That gentleman right there had his hand up early.
I was talking with some neighbors of Mr. Neal, and he was the guy arrested for assault with a deadly weapon in January. He is, according to neighbors, deputies were called out a number of times in the very recent months because he was shooting his weapon off at all hours of the day and night, shotguns, handguns, semis. And is there anything that should have been done, now that you can look back, or could have been done at that time. Someone with a violent accusation against him, he's going to trial for it, and now he's shooting his weapons off in the middle of the night. Could something have been done?
I am aware of incidents where neighbors reported shots coming from that residence. On every time we responded, we would try to make contact with Mr. Neal. Like I said, he was not law enforcement friendly. He would not come to the door. Actually, his house was arranged in a manner where we couldn't detect him being there. So, and on at least 2 occasions, officers put the house under surveillance, hoping he would come back out.
All right, everybody, welcome here to News Now. You're taking a live look at a police chase in California. We are watching this live. Sometimes that shot goes a little bit in and out here, folks. Stay right with us. As you can see, shot going a little bit in and out with us here, and we just lost it. Let's see if we'll get it back in just a little bit.
This is a Fox 10 News Alert.
All right, everybody, welcome here to News Now. Taking a look at here of that fire in St. Louis, but we have another breaking news update happening in California. This is a police chase happening right now. The police are following this white car. You can see the police there behind. Speeds right now, nothing erratic. Hopefully it stays that way. This is in the Los Angeles area, and I do have to say sometimes the shot goes a little bit in and out, so stay right here with us on News Now if that happens, though. But this police pursuit, we don't know the reason why this suspect is on the loose here, and usually it has to do with a stolen vehicle, but we don't have that confirmed just yet. But nothing erratic at this time. That's the good news for the people that are on these roadways. So many times people ask me, Mike, why do these people continue to try to outrun the police when they know they're right behind them? They know there's people in undercover situations, and there is also a helicopter high above. And well, the reason I feel like is they just really try to extend their final moments of freedom the most they can. They know eventually they're going to get caught, but this one is taking a very solemn sort of view here. Is this suspect not changing any lanes, just staying to that middle lane here. You can see more police coming in the back here, but at this situation, nothing erratic, so that's good for the people that are on these roadways and might not know what's going on. Sometimes they just don't know when a police pursuit is happening. Now it looks like a little bit more traffic coming up. Let's see what the suspect's going to do. Of course, it's going to get a little erratic now as a big traffic jam coming up here. Let's to see what's going to happen here. I don't think they can navigate anymore. Let's see what police will do in this situation. You can see those white cars just blending in together right now, and you would have to think maybe the suspect is laying on that horn right now trying to get other drivers out of the way. It looks like he might bump this driver here, and maybe police can just, come on, let's try to sandwich him in here. They had that opportunity. Okay, the suspect, and he's sidewinded right now. Viewer discretion is advised, everyone. Okay, that police officer coming out. Looks like they have him in custody there. All right, have the officer there in custody. I have that suspect there in custody, thanks by that motorcycle who came out and was able to get that suspect there on the ground. This was a chase that we had just for a little bit of more than 3 minutes here. Very quick one. We didn't see this suspect do anything erratic until the very end when he saw that traffic jam. This is in the Los Angeles area, everyone, and great job by police. They able to get this suspect there on the ground and nobody hurt in the process. That's a job well done by officers there who now looking to make sure no one else was inside the car, and they'll get this person in jail and then hopefully get these roadways back open here. Taking a look here at the suspect there as they're going to put him in a car, and now they got to go through the vehicle just to see what else was inside that car. But police doing a great job able to get that suspect away from the car. They were able to pin it, and nobody was injured, no officers were injured, and no innocent people here. You can see the people on the roadways, though. They were probably taking pictures or video or something's happening because they're not moving at this time. Now they're getting that vehicle off the roadway there. You can see the officer got in there and was able, he's just going to put it to the side so they could have traffic back up here. So great job by police. This chase is now over, so awesome job by the police officers there. You never know what kind of day they're going to have. That's, you know, they leave work and they don't know exactly what is going to happen during their day, and this one turned out to be a police pursuit. We see so many of these police pursuits in Los Angeles. And this one had a safe ending for all involved there. And you can see people on the roadways there. They're slowing down. They want to see, okay, what exactly just happened there. But this pursuit is over, and suspect now in custody. All right, folks, taking you back out to St. Louis right now. Take a look at this fire truck as it is a total loss here as debris just smashed this fire truck. Fortunately, we aren't learning of any injuries with the firefighters, so that's good news there. And welcome back here to News Now, taking a live look at these aerials that we continue to show you out of St. Louis with this 5-alarm fire, massive warehouse right now fire. 80 firefighters are battling this fire, and we'll see if we could show you just in a little bit if Sky Fox is able to pan back to that fire truck that is destroyed at this time because debris just came right on top of that fire truck. Fortunately, we're not learning of any injuries to the firefighters here, but the firefighters are going to have very busy afternoon and evening. You can see they don't even have this fire under control yet as they're battling this 5-alarm fire in this warehouse setting that sent a plume of thick black smoke up from the Botanical Heights neighborhood. Even the fire truck was smashed when a wall of the building collapsed about 11:30 their local time. The fire started small in the basement of the warehouse near 39th Street and Park Avenue. That's if you're from the St. Louis area, everyone. It happened about 10:15 local time, but it proved difficult for firefighters to find and contain in the smoky interior of the business of the Park Warehouse Service. That's what it's called. Eventually, firefighters were ordered out of the building about 11:30 this morning. Part of the building collapsed. So part of that building collapsed, and they were ordered to get out of there for some time. There was a whooshing sound, and a black smoke billowed out of the building's doors and windows. Fire burst through the roof, and a wall on the south side of the building collapsed onto that fire truck. The truck did not appear to be occupied at the time, and there was no immediate report of injuries. That's the best news there. Other than that, bricks and other debris littered the street around the fire truck, and aerial images are showing that the roof of the truck's cab caved in. Let's try to see if they could show that to us one more time here on News Now. The St. Louis fire captain said the building dates back to the 1920s. Part of the building has sprinkler systems, but the basement area where the fire was spreading may not have those sprinkler systems. Firefighters appeared concerned about the blaze spreading and were checking on homes in the nearby area. Firefighters were initially warned that dangerous magnesium was stored in the building, but the fire captain said that turned out to be false. The warehouse contained various materials stored by businesses that lease space there. One worker was reportedly taken to a hospital for smoke inhalation there. But you're taking a look here at the massive amounts of smoke. You could see the ladder trucks right there and flames continuing to rip out of this building as we take this live for you right here on News Now. Remember, when breaking news does occur, it doesn't matter where it's happening. You know, we have you covered right here, especially in St. Louis. Let's see, you can see all the fire trucks, all the first responders there continuing to show their support, and they got about 80 to 90 firefighters there now on the scene. And still, we've been showing this to you since the top of the hour here, and it looks like they have made no progress yet. This is showing you how difficult sometimes it is for first responders to try to get a hold on a fire, especially. Oh, there's the shot, folks. So they're going to zoom in, and you're going to see the truck there. Look at the debris that smashed the part of that cab there. That is a massive amount of the wall that came just crashing down on that truck. Fortunately, we learned that this was not occupied at the time because firefighters were out and about working this fire. But could you imagine if there was a firefighter inside that cab? It could have been deadly there. So fortunately, that wasn't the case. You're taking a look at the 3 ladder trucks there all around right now as fire continues to just rip through this warehouse. Obviously, it's going to be a total loss there. You can see still on the rooftops right now as that fire continues to rip holes. But we'll continue to provide more updates for you when we do get them here. But fortunately, what we learned was about 10 to 15 people were inside at the time, but they were able to escape. That's the best scenario there. They were able to escape, and only one person out of that 15 or so had to be transported to a hospital for smoke inhalation. So Firefighters are going to have a very busy afternoon and evening as they have a big mess here. First things first, they need to knock down this fire. But when you think about a warehouse that leases space for other businesses to store their goods, you don't know what kind of combustibles was inside and what kind of fuel really was inside of this warehouse. But it looks like to be very big and massive, so a lot to be burned there, and it looks like maybe Sky Fox could be leaving the scene shortly. Take a look at that smoke that is in the area there. This is in South St. Louis in the Botanical Heights area neighborhood, so maybe if you're from that area, you know exactly where that is at. All right, looks like that shot is going to be leaving us, so if we get any more updates, of course, we will bring them to you right here on News Now. All right, we do have some other news that we want to bring to you right here. This happened a little bit earlier ago where there was 4 congressmen, Democratic congressmen, who came out and said they are starting impeachment proceedings for President Donald Trump. Now, they've been saying this really since he's been inaugurated, and now they are finally trying to get some kind of momentum behind these initial proceedings to try to impeach the president there. So let's hear a little bit from them. This was just about an hour ago. We've had a lot of news here today on News Now.
Good morning. We're going to go ahead and get started, although a couple of people are going to join us, and a couple other people who are on the resolution will not be here today. But I am proud to stand here with my friend, Congressman Gutierrez, with other Congress people who will be here in announcing that we're introducing articles of impeachment to remove President Trump from office. There will be, I believe, 6 signatories on the resolution. We have taken this action because of great concern for our country and our Constitution, our national security, and our democracy. We believe that President Trump has violated the Constitution, and we've introduced 5 articles of impeachment. The first is obstruction of justice, which deals with Mr. Comey's firing. The second is a violation of the Constitution's Foreign Emolument Clause, which deals with monies he's taken from foreign powers without the consent of Congress. The third is a violation of the Domestic Emoluments Clause, which deals with monies he's made from the United States and as personal businesses beyond that of his salary, which is also forbidden by our Constitution. The fourth is undermining our federal judiciary, and the fifth is undermining freedom of the press. These are progressive actions he's taken over a period of time against the press and against the judiciary, with positive actions to cap off a pattern of behavior, belittling and questioning these institutions that are so important for our democracy. The judiciary obviously is in the Constitution and an equal branch of government. The press is not in the Constitution, but freedom of press is. And he's threatened licenses of broadcast stations, so-called fake news, and other actions that hurt our democracy. They definitely hurt our democracy. They're fundamental parts of it. So we're calling upon the House to begin impeachment hearings immediately. It's not a call for a vote, it's a call for hearings. I don't expect the House Judiciary Committee, which is operated like a branch of the administration, to take up hearings. It's their responsibility, in my opinion, and I believe Congressman Gutierrez's and our other colleagues, to have hearings. But of the 4 committees that have jurisdiction, House and Senate Intelligence and House and Senate Judiciary, the House Judiciary, which is the particular committee which would have responsibility for bringing impeachment charges through the Constitution. Al, come join us, please. Has that responsibility, and of which I sit as the ranking member on the Constitution Subcommittee, has not taken any action whatsoever or had any hearings whatsoever. And because of that, it's even more important that Congressman Gutierrez, who's a member of this committee, and myself bring this impeachment article for a failure of our chairman to even have hearings. If we don't have hearings, which we don't expect, we will be holding briefings and participating in briefings on these particular charges to let people know what's going on as we experience them, that the Constitution is being violated, that our democracy is being threatened, and to bring these charges to light in the form of briefings with experts who will help us explain it to the American people. Some people may say, why in light of the investigation of Bob Mueller? We support Bob Mueller's investigation, but he's looking at criminal charges. And that can or may not be an impeachable offense. More likely than not, it will be. We think he's going to come up with things, but that's for him, and it's going to take some time. There's no reason why we don't start now with definite violations of our Constitution and threats to our democracy. There are already sufficient facts in the public record to warrant this start of impeachment proceedings in Congress, and given the magnitude of the constitutional crisis, there's no reason for delay. With regard to obstruction, we know President Trump fired FBI Director Comey while the Bureau was investigating potential collusion with Russia and the Trump campaign, and the President has already admitted on national television that he had the Russia investigation on his mind when he fired Director Comey. We already know that Donald Trump Jr. met with a Russian attorney who offered to provide damaging evidence on Hillary Clinton as part of Russian government's efforts to help his father's campaign. These facts are uncontested. They are similarly clear-cut facts with regard to the foreign and domestic emoluments clauses. You just have to go to the Trump Hotel, the Trump Tower, see what the Saudis have paid, what other foreign governments have paid, what the Secret Service is paying, what people pay to stay at Mar-a-Lago, and other expenses that we're paying right now. And it's because President Trump, unlike any president in recent history, has not released his taxes and has not put his ownership of assets into a blind trust. The framers of our Constitution wisely prohibited presidents from accepting the payments that have been made, such as the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia paying $270,000 to the Trump International Hotel as part of their lobbying effort. And the Embassy of Kuwait held an event there spending, give or take, $50,000. Harry Truman didn't do it. President Eisenhower didn't do it. The Bushes didn't do it. Nobody's done it. Nobody benefits financially, directly, as they are President of the United States. It demeans the office, it demeans the country, it demeans the Constitution. President Trump has repeated visits to Trump-branded properties, which he retains an ownership interest, and that has caused the federal government to spend money there. As I've mentioned, Secret Service golf carts at Mar-a-Lago, lodging in Mar-a-Lago. In Hawaii, he couldn't help but say that the golf tournament where, or maybe it was Korea, that a golf tournament where it was won by a Korean was at his golf club. There's a well-established record of President Trump with regards to undermining the independence of the judiciary, pardoning Sheriff Arpaio is part of that destruction of the judicial process, and the so-called judges. Before I yield to Mr. Gutierrez, I said after Charlottesville I was going to bring impeachment charges. I've waited 3 months to work the House, find other people who would support this. There are 5 others who will be on the resolution. There are others who have told me they will be there soon. They wanted to be there. Also wanted to perfect the resolution. We've worked with scholars. I want to thank my staff, Mr. Wiseman, my chief of staff, Ms. Dillahay, and everybody else who's worked on this, and members of the committee who are not here, and none of the committee who worked with it to make it an article that's worthy of the Judiciary Committee and of an article of impeachment, which is an important process. What happened at Charlottesville burned me as I saw Klansmen and neo-Nazis march and the president not respond in the manner which the president of the United States should in looking out and protecting people of my faith and people of my district, African Americans, who were being threatened with their very liberty. Continually, he has gone on with other offenses. It's important that we not let the failure of the Republicans to stop us from doing what is right, what is our charge in the Constitution, what is our duty to bring impeachment when it occurs, and to stand up for the Constitution and American values. I'd like to recognize Representative Luis Gutierrez with great appreciation. He'll recognize Representative Green. He'll represent the next person in Council.
Well, Congressman Cohen, thank you. I have to say I enjoy working with you on the Judiciary Committee, and it gives me great honor to co-sponsor these articles of impeachment. Let me put this in context. There are many reasons why I think the president is an awful president, an awful person. But not all of those reasons rise to the level of impeaching a sitting president. We are not seeking his impeachment because of what he did before he was president. For example, he proudly bragged about sexually assaulting women. And he has been linked to such a long list of sexually inappropriate conduct that I think it is fair to conclude that he is hostile to women in general. We are not seeking to impeach him because of the growing racial and ethnic tension in this country that, in my opinion, this president knowingly and willingly activates by playing up racial hatred and bias, and he thrives on it. He didn't denounce Nazi marches and racism because he knows he benefits from them. I'm not joining this effort because of his sustained anti-Latino bias. He started his campaign by calling Mexican immigrants murderers and rapists. He doesn't think that an American-born judge in Indiana with a Spanish-sounding last name is legitimate, just as he does not believe that Latinos voting is legitimate. And I think he is taking the country in exactly the wrong direction on immigration by taking documented immigrants, those legally in this country, and making them undocumented so that he can deport them. I think the Muslim ban and ending DACA are fundamentally hurtful and harmful to the United States and our values as a nation. I could probably name up another dozen examples how President Trump is doing deep, permanent damage to the United States and all of our people by taking away health care, erasing environmental protections, rolling back protections for the LGBTQ community and working people and immigrants. And God knows, I think, what he is doing or not doing on Puerto Rico is deeply offensive. However, what elevates certain actions to the level of high crimes and misdemeanors are the following examples. President Trump asked the Vice President and others to leave the room, including the Attorney General, to leave the room so that he could have a private, one-on-one conversation with FBI Director Jim Comey to tell him to back off on the Russian investigation. You do not ask witnesses to leave the room unless you know you are committing a crime, and in this case, it was clearly obstruction of justice. The president once said, I'm going to quote, "It is very possible that I could be the first presidential candidate to run and make money on it." And he's kept his word on that promise by continuing to line his pockets with money and to drive business to his brands using the public office of the presidency. That is not right, that is not illegal, and he should be impeached for it. I think the ongoing investigations will uncover even more instances where the president has violated the law and violated the public trust. And I'm glad those investigations are still moving forward, despite, in some instances, attempts by the president to slow them down or derail them. This is not a substitute, what we are doing here today, being led by Congressman Cohen, is not a substitute for the investigations that should and will go forward. But the Congress needs to get started. The U.S. Congress, and specifically the Judiciary Committee, on which I sit with Steve Cohen, is the place where impeachment starts, and if we fail to file these articles of impeachment, we would be failing to do our jobs. Estamos aquí porque creemos que el presidente...
Wealthy people shouldn't be disrespected for their wealth. But I don't know any wealthy people that are knocking down my door saying that they need a few more $1,000s. But I know a lot of poor people that need a few $100s, and this particular measure is not doing many of the things that would allow for them to be able to get on that last rung of that ladder and lift themselves up. I heard the gentleman say a rising tide lifts all boats. They had the Fort Lauderdale Boat Show, the largest one in the world, week before last. All those yachts were lifted, but them little dinghies with the people fishing out in Lake Okeechobee, well, were not lifted worth a doggone by this particular measure. It does so, this bill, on the backs of middle and working class people and future generations. With this bill, the former deficit hawk Republican majority would add $1.5 trillion to the debt, while potentially triggering $25 billion in cuts to Medicare. And I might add, that is where they're headed. Look out, Medicare. Look out, Social Security. Look out, Medicaid. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I urge a no vote on the rule in the online bill. Yield back.
Gentleman's time's expired. The gentleman from Texas recognized to close. The gentleman has 4.5 minutes remaining.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much, and I want to thank my colleague, the gentleman, Judge Hastings from Florida, for his exemplary work and the work of his colleagues at the Rules Committee and my colleagues also on the Republican side. Mr. Speaker, our previous speaker, the gentleman from Butler, Pennsylvania, Mike O'Kelly, had it best when he said, and I quote,
And welcome back here to News Now, taking a live look at the U.S. House floor where members continue to debate the tax cut bill. Let's continue to listen in.
Can balance the budget, and tax reduction can pave the way to that. What he did not say is, that will be in the record, is that is John F. Kennedy, December 14th, 1962, 55 years ago, in an address to the Economic Club of New York. Mr. Speaker, in fact, there have been a lot of people here who have given testimony. I think testimony that they intended to sway the voters and those listening in this country that the tax code that we have works just fine. But then they spoke about the frailties of that. They talked about jobs going offshore. They talked about jobs and economic activity going somewhere else. I, being from Dallas, Texas, hear stories every day about people who are coming to Texas, coming to North Texas, coming because of the economic climate that will allow them and their companies to have a better shot at not only being competitive, but as Mike Kelly said, to be winners. Winners in this economy, at the very top of the heap rather than at the bottom of the heap. Well, what this common denominator is that my state of Texas does do the things that this bill does also. It keeps taxes low. It creates opportunity. It gives the job creator. By the way, how many poor people create jobs? I don't know. How many those that really have incentive in entrepreneurship create jobs? A ton of them. We're going to grow entrepreneurs out of what we do today. We're going to grow young people getting out of college, veterans leaving the military, coming back and seeing where they can make a go of it. Instead of it being a 95% failure rate of new business, which is what it is, it's a heavy bar because of rules, regulations, and taxes. We're going to make it easier. The White House Council on Economic Advisors based their review as they provided the economic outlook to us of more than 100 academic papers. Estimates that corporate provisions in this tax bill alone will grow our economy, not leave us in 23rd place, as Mike Kelly said. Who wants to be in 23rd place? Well, if you want to be in the top 25 and you're comfortable, sorry. We want to be at the top. We want to make America great again. We want to be able to say that businesses all over the United States stands a chance. And that's what this does. The Council of Economic Advisors says that this will grow the economy to between 3 and 5%. Whoops. They got comfortable with 1.2 over 8 years. I'm not comfortable, and the American people aren't comfortable either. And we're going to add some $700 billion to the economy this next 10 years. That's the guess. That's what Republicans want to do. But it's based on a lot of factors. It's based on hard work. America has the best, most innovative workers in the world. We want to put this together with an opportunity because we have a great place to be. The United States of America, any of our states, we have the best energy policies in the world, and we have the best price. We have the best workers. We have toolkits with our universities. Our industry will grow back, reinvest in themselves. We're going to take our tax code and take what is $5.6 trillion worth of tax areas and move that where it will boost our economy. We will become pro-growth again. Yes, we heard it that it was John F. Kennedy, it was Ronald Reagan, and it's going to be making America great again. Mr. Speaker, let's see here. For that reason, I urge my colleagues to support this rule and the underlying legislation, support and boost middle-class Americans. I yield back most of my time, and I move the previous question.
The question is on ordering the previous question on the resolution. Those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I ask for the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes.
All right, so they are going to be recording their votes. I just want to take you now back out to St. Louis as we continue to showcase this just huge fire. It's a 5-alarm fire in South St. Louis, and you're taking a look here of this warehouse fire. More than 80 firefighters are continuing to try to get some sort of control right now, but obviously they have not been able to at this moment. You can take a look. This is in a section of the roof right now that is just totally exposed. Obviously, it's going to be a total loss of this building. But let's see if Sky Fox can zoom out just a little bit here and really shows. Thank you here as you're taking a look at the different sort of ladder trucks all around this warehouse. This is a fire that we first started showing you at about 11 o'clock our time here in Arizona, and it's been like the same type of look here that we've been seeing all hour right here. So we're continuing to hope for the very best for these firefighters so they stay safe during this very, very out of control 5-alarm fire in South St. Louis. Still no word yet on how this fire started, and we're not going to know for quite some time because firefighters have one mission right now, and that's obviously to get this fire out of control and out. You can see the 3 ladder trucks trying their very best, but not making a dent right now in this massive fire that is continuing to rage on there in the South St. Louis area. We've been showing you these images all afternoon long here on News Now. And remember, when breaking news does occur, we have you covered right here on News Now. But there was a moment there where we even had a fire truck that totally damaged because of debris that came down from a collapsed wall. That was a little bit earlier that we showed you that. Only one person had to be taken to the hospital so far, and that was a worker inside this warehouse that needed to be treated for smoke inhalation. Other than that, no injuries associated with that. We hope it stays like that throughout the entire afternoon and evening. But look at this massive fire. The ladder trucks continuing to work, but it's going to take quite some time. That's going to do it for us here on News Now. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Thank you to so much of you on fox10phoenix.com as well as you take a look at the shot. Still continuing to work this fire. Thank you so much. News Now will be back in an hour. We will be back in an hour. Samia will start out that coverage. Thanks so much, everybody, and we'll see you in a few.